Hello folks, we need to have a little bit of a chat about the Model 3 PCS. So quick overview, BMW E39 and BMW E46. This was the first car that I had the PCS in, and about a year or 18 months ago I removed it and upgraded, or well, changed it anyway, to this Mitsubishi Outlander charger and DC-DC converter. In the E39 we have a European spec 3-phase, as we see we've our 3-phase and neutral connection on the main side. Model 3 PCS charger and also DC-DC converter. So, welcome to the boring talking video about the PCS. So let's start with the first thing that I've seen being misconstrued out there. I made a video when I changed from PCS to Mitsubishi Outlander charger in the E46. And the reason that I changed out the PCS in that vehicle, I did explain at the time, but for a very quick recap, that was the very first PCS that I'd ever received. It was gifted to me by a patron 5 or 6 years ago easily now. And I had done all the reverse engineering on that, and I had absolutely hammered that thing from a hardware point of view. I had blown components on it, I had cut tracks on it, I had done all kinds of physical damage to that PCB, okay, and physically damaged some of the components on there. But I'd repaired it several times and then blown it again and repaired it and so on, and eventually ended up installing it in the E46, where it worked away for quite a long time. Now, as I say, maybe a year and a half ago, it blew again. And it was the same parts again, the ones that I'd kind of bodged in there, and I had wire links all around the place and ripped up pads and tracks on the board. And when I went to repair it again, it just, I had just exhausted my ability to make repairs to the PCB. The PCS is a very rare item to show up, so I wasn't able to get another one, and it was much easier and cheaper at the time for me to get the Mitsubishi charger. And that also then allowed me to add the Mitsubishi charger to the Zombieverter VCU as another module. And that's why I took the PCS out of the E46. Now, unfortunately, I've seen various comments going around that I had removed it because it was no good. I had removed it because I'd given up on it. It was too hard to control. It was software problems, hardware problems, all that kind of thing. No such thing. Okay, it was simply because that was the very first one that I'd ever received, and I myself had physically damaged the hardware through negligence and through experimentation to the point that it just wasn't practically possible for me to carry out a repair again. So that was the only PCS that I had available to me when I designed the control board. And as I said, I had that installed in the E46 and it worked away fine. However, it wasn't long after moving here, which was in 2022, that it became apparent that there were certain PCS variants that were not working with this controller. Specifically, the firmware on the PCS was not compatible any longer with the CAN messages that were being sent by this controller to control it. So there wasn't a lot I could do here because I didn't have access to those modules. But a very kind gentleman whom I have forgotten his name. I've even forgotten what country he was from, but as far as I remember, it was an Eastern European country, sent me, he had purchased, I think, 2 PCS controllers from me. And so he was having the same problem, and we got into a bit of a conversation, and he said, look, I'm just going to box up the whole lot and send it to you. Now, very rarely do I accept things like that because it usually leads to problems and it's a time hole for me. But on this occasion I did, because the benefit was he'd get his PCSs working and I would get to figure out what was going on and update the software on the controller. And that's exactly what occurred. So I got 2 PCSs in here, got them on the bench, made videos about it that are on YouTube and probably also Vimeo, and worked out the differences in the CAN messages and got all 3 of those PCSs up and running. So I contacted the gentleman then, let him know what was going on, sent him links to the videos and that, and he said, look, that's fantastic. And we said, look, we were going to pack up the PCSs and send them back to him, and he said, you keep one, right? So he said, look, you know, you've done all this work for me, I only need one, you keep one of them for further development, testing, put it in a car, whatever. So that is that Euro PCS now that you see in the E39. That's the one, that's one of the 2 that he sent to me for testing. So for a while I had the original one in the E46, which was a US spec one, and I still have the 3-phase European spec one in the E39, and that's worked away. When I was moving house here, the end of 2021, beginning 2022, I did not have DC fast charging in the E39 working at that stage because I didn't have CHAdeMO implemented in the Zombieverter. And I had an old JLD 505 system in there, it just did not work. So what I actually ended up doing was to ferry the car from my old house to here, which is roughly 160 miles. I was using 3-phase on-street rapid charging, using the PCS at its full power of 10.5 to 11 kilowatts. And yes, that was a long day, but it got the car here. So, reason for making this video is, number 1, to give you folks a bit of a background on some of those things that seem to be getting missed. And the second part is that there would now appear to be a similar situation going on whereby there's now some folks that have the PCS controller connecting up, and it is kind of back to that way that it was in 22, whereby it's either not functioning fully or it's not functioning at all. Now, so what I want to try and do here with this second part of this very long, boring, talkative video that probably no one's going to watch, so yay, is I want to try and give you some tips for getting through this part, because it's no good to me or anyone that might decide to get involved with this to just say it doesn't work, or this part doesn't work, or or something like that, just a generic statement. That doesn't help, because there can be a myriad of things. So what is the root problem here? Well, the root problem is that Tesla vehicles in particular, they're very kind of well known for this. They do a lot of different software updates, and those software updates are for all the modules in the vehicle. Now that'd be fine if they left the CAN messaging the same. So basically they don't do that, of course. So different firmware revisions in different models of PCS and other Tesla modules will, from firmware to firmware, use different CAN IDs and different message formats. So simple analogy, let's say that version 1 is speaking French, it gets updated to version 2 and all of a sudden they're speaking German. My controller is speaking French and the German PCS is, ich kann Sie nicht verstehen, sprechen Sie Deutsch bitte? And of course nothing happens. Now, Elon, being a decent skin, decided to help us. And in all of those PCS firmware versions, there is what they call the alert log. So what happens is, at power up, the PCS will check its own systems out. Then it will check the communication to what it thinks is the BMS controller in the battery. And if there's errors in that communication, the first thing it will do is it will log those alerts in its own memory. Then when we attempt to use certain functions, be it DC-DC converting, be it charging single phase, charging three phase, etc., if there's any problems there, it will save those problems in the alert log. Unfortunately, in the last firmware revision that I did there 2 years ago now, we are able to, via the web interface, interrogate that alert log and basically ask the PCS, what's your problem, right? You can say, was ist das? Okay? So we can say to the PCS, what errors have you logged? And the controller via the web interface will read out in reasonably plain text what those errors are. And I explained how to do that via the web interface in a previous video that I made here on the bench. And I will link that down below for you so you'll be able to review that. So, what would be really great to get to the bottom of this so we can update the firmware again would be, number one, a reasonably good description of your model year PCS. Is it single phase US spec? Is it three phase European spec? What is the firmware version on the PCS? And again, you can read that out via the web interface of the controller. So then a dump of the parameters from the controller will show us all of these things. Finally then, using the procedure that I described in that previous video, when you have a problem, be it on a bench test setup or in a vehicle, look at the alerts, write them down and put those guys up on the forum for us so that we'll know then, okay, so it's this model year vehicle, it's this type of PCS, it's this firmware version on it, and these are the alerts that have been logged. Now, if we have that data, then it's not impossible to work out what the communication differences are and hopefully provide some firmware updates that can get more variants of the PCS up and running for people. So that's about what I wanted to say in terms of getting the data so we can actually make some diagnostics on it. Currently, the firmware, it does adapt to different CAN formats. That's what I was able to do when I had the three of them set up, because the original US spec PCS that I then had in the E46 had a very different CAN messaging structure to the European one that's in the E39, which was even different to the other European spec one that the Eastern European gentleman had sent me. So at the minute, believe it or not, the controller firmware has the ability to interpret 3 different types of message from the PCS based upon some of the CAN data coming into it and some of the firmware information that is available to read from the PCS. A couple final wrap-ups are, I've been asked a few times as well, is it possible to flash the PCS to a known firmware? So a bit like what they do with the Model 3 drive unit and so on. Yes, it's possible to do that. No, it's not an easy procedure. Yes, I am able to do that. No, I'm not going to offer that as a service. And it's just not something I want to do. I would much rather have the controller be able to have a little database on there of different firmware versions, and it can just flick automatically and fire out the CAN that is required by that firmware version. So, long, boring video, folks, but did feel that I had to make this just because there's bit of misunderstanding going along out there, and I hope that this will help people to understand what's needed from a development point of view in order to fix some of these firmware problems with probably, you know, newer, in the last 2 years or more now, PCSs. So I'll leave it there. Be sure to give this video a big thumbs down and a dislike to make sure that it doesn't get spread around anywhere, because that would be really foolish. Do check the links in the description for the Open Inverter Forum and GitHub and all that, because like all of my projects, they are open source. So if, you know, other folks had gotten in on it, you know, maybe we'd have a bit more development done, but c'est la vie. Also, I'll dig out the videos I did on the PCS controller when I was working on it here 2 years ago, and link those in the description for you as well. So that's it, folks. Boring talking video finished. And until next time, happy alert log reading.